The millionaire dined alone at the same humble restaurant every night until the waitress said 3 words that changed his life forever. Before we start the story, leave in the comments what city you're watching from, and at the end, don't forget to rate this story from 0 to 10. Enjoy the story, everyone. Dorian Briggs dined alone every night. Not at restaurants with international ratings, not in penthouses overlooking the Pacific Ocean, where executives toasted million-dollar contracts with champagne that cost more than an average family's rent. Dorian Briggs, despite being the founder of one of the largest technology companies on the West Coast and having a bank account that would make any accountant cry with emotion, dined every night at the same neighborhood restaurant in Los Angeles. A place called the Salt Corner, which ironically always got the amount of salt wrong in everything. The place had wooden tables so worn they seemed to have survived at least 2 world wars and a hurricane. The menu was plastic-coated and sticky. The air had a permanent smell of fried food that settled into clothes like a tenant who doesn't pay rent. And the television in the corner was eternally stuck on a sports channel that nobody watched, but nobody had the courage to turn off. It was perfect, at least for Dorian. Every night, at 7:42 p.m., because Dorian was the type of person who arrived at specific and strange times, he would walk through the door, wave to no one in particular, and sit at the same table. Table number 7. Right corner. Against the wall, with a faded painting of a boat that looked like it had been painted by someone who had never seen a boat in their life. He always ordered the same thing, steak with potatoes. No variation, no adventure, no asking, what does the chef recommend today? Because, honestly, the chef was a gentleman named Gus, who recommended everything with the same phrase, "It's fresh, I think." And then Dorian would eat in silence. He chewed as if he were calculating algorithms between one forkful and the next. He looked at his plate as if the potatoes were investment spreadsheets. And when he finished, he left a generous tip, waved to no one again, and disappeared into the night like a very well-dressed ghost. The restaurant staff already had their theories. Marcy, the assistant cook, swore he was an undercover international spy. Look at that man's posture. Nobody sits that straight unless they've been trained for interrogations. Gus thought he was a romantic widower who had lost his wife at that table and couldn't move on. "It's poetic," he would say, cleaning a pot with dreamy eyes. Tragic and poetic. Benny, the stock boy, was convinced he was a robot from a technology company conducting human behavior tests in the wild. Have you noticed he never blinks when he's cutting his meat? Never. Blinks. And then there was Callie Rivera. Callie was the night shift waitress, and unlike the rest of the staff, she didn't have wild theories. Callie had bills to pay, a mother with too many opinions about her love life, and a natural talent for talking to anyone in any situation. Anyone except the silent man at table number 7. Not that she didn't try. In the first month, she approached with her professional smile and asked if he wanted to see dessert. He said no, thank you, in a way so polite and so empty it felt like she had offered him a life insurance contract. In the second month, she tried to make small talk about the weather. He looked at the window, said, "It's adequate," and went back to staring at his plate as if the potatoes had offended his family. In the third month, Callie gave up. And so it went. 8 months of silent dinners, generous tips, and absolutely no human interaction that lasted more than 7 seconds. Until that night. It was a Thursday. Callie was exhausted. The shift had been chaotic. A group of lost tourists who ordered tacos at a restaurant that clearly didn't serve tacos, a child who spilled juice on 3 different tables, and Marcy burning the special sauce for the second time that week because she was too busy watching cat videos on her phone. Callie just wanted the clock to strike midnight so she could go home, put her feet up, and watch anything that didn't require her ability to fake sympathy. And then Dorian Briggs walked in. Even from across the room, Callie noticed something was different. He didn't walk with that perfect posture of his. His shoulders were slightly curved, as if carrying something invisible and heavy. He sat at table number 7, but didn't pick up the menu he didn't even need, since he always ordered the same thing. He just sat there, staring at nothing. Callie served the steak automatically. She placed the plate in front of him, with the professionalism of someone who had made that movement 8,000 times. And then she was turning to leave. When it happened, Dorian reached out to grab the water glass, but his movement was strange, inattentive, as if his mind were on another continent. His fingers slipped. The glass tipped over. The water spread across the table, soaking the cloth napkin and dripping onto the floor. And Dorian didn't react. He didn't call anyone, didn't apologize, didn't try to clean it up. He just sat there staring at the water dripping as if it were a metaphor too deep for anyone present to understand. And then he sighed. It wasn't a normal sigh. It was the kind of sigh that seemed to come from the depths of his soul, dragging along all the things the person couldn't say. It was the sigh of someone who was very, very tired of something no one could see. Callie grabbed a cloth and approached. She began cleaning the table in silence, gathering the pieces of soaked napkin. She could simply leave afterward. It was protocol. Clean, smile politely, ask if he needed another glass, and move on with life. But something about that sigh made her stop. She looked at him, really looked, and saw what no one in the restaurant had seen in 8 months, an exhausted man pretending to be fine. And before she could think, before she could calculate whether it was appropriate or not, Callie said the 3 words no one had ever said to Dorian Briggs. "Are you okay?" The silence that followed was so thick you could cut it with the steak knife that was still untouched on his plate. Dorian raised his eyes, and for the first time in 8 months, he really looked at her. Not through her, like he did with everyone. Not beyond her, like someone already thinking about the next thing. He looked at her and said nothing. 5 seconds, 10 seconds. Time stretched absurdly. Callie immediately began to regret it. Why did she have to open her mouth? Why couldn't she just be a normal waitress who cleans tables and pretends customers are furniture that tips? She was about to apologize, say it wasn't her business, that he could ignore the question, when Dorian did something unexpected. He blinked, and Callie could swear she saw his eyes get moist for a fraction of a second. He began, and his voice came out hoarse as if it hadn't been used for anything but commands and instructions for a long time. Nobody asks me that. Callie didn't know what to say, so she did what she did best, used humor to hide the discomfort. Well, considering you seem to have a grudge against that plate for 8 months, I figured it was time someone asked. She pointed to the untouched steak. Seriously, what did the meat do to you? You look at it like it owes you money. Dorian looked at the plate, looked at Callie, and then did something no employee of that restaurant had ever witnessed. He laughed. It was a short laugh, almost surprised, as if his own body had forgotten how to make that sound. But it was a laugh, real, human. And something changed there. Callie didn't know what. Maybe nothing. Maybe everything. Maybe it was just a strange Thursday she would forget next week. But when Dorian finally answered, his voice was different, softer, less machine, more person. "No," he said honestly. "I'm not okay. Haven't been for a long time, I think." Callie nodded, not with pity. Not with that poor thing look people make when they want to seem empathetic. Just with understanding. "Well," she said, tucking the cloth into her apron, "at least you know. That's something." And then she walked away, went to the counter, and came back with a new glass of water. "On the house," she said with a half smile. "Since you kind of drowned the other one." Dorian took the glass, and for the first time in 8 months, he didn't look like a well-dressed ghost dining alone. He looked like someone who had finally been seen. Callie spent the entire night thinking about that laugh. It wasn't normal. She served dozens of customers per week, heard bad jokes, forced smiles, drunken laughter. But that short, surprised laugh from Dorian Briggs kept hammering in her head like a catchy song that won't go away. Maybe because it seemed like the first real laugh he'd had in years. Or maybe because Callie urgently needed a social life that didn't involve analyzing lonely customers at 11 at night. The next morning, she woke up convinced she had imagined everything. The dramatic sigh, the spilled glass, the vulnerable confession. She was probably too tired, and her brain had created a romantic soap opera where there was nothing but a strange guy who liked steaks. He probably wouldn't even come back today. Or he would come back and pretend nothing happened, like any sensible person would do. At 7:38 p.m., the restaurant door opened. 4 minutes earlier than normal. Callie noticed the instant Dorian Briggs walked in, as if he were late for a meeting that didn't exist. He was different. Not in his clothes, still impeccable, still looking like he'd stepped out of a fashion magazine for executives who hate smiling. The difference was in his eyes. They swept the restaurant too quickly, as if searching for something, or someone. And then they found Callie at the counter, and immediately shifted to the ceiling. Callie almost let out a laugh. The man who probably commanded meetings with international investors had just looked at her and panicked like a teenager who sees the girl he likes in the school hallway. He walked to table number 7 with a stiffness that bordered on comical. He sat, straightened the silverware that was already perfectly aligned, straightened it again, and then stared at the plastic-coated menu as if he were reading a 500-page legal document. The same menu he'd ignored for 8 months because he always ordered the same thing. Callie decided this was going to be fun. She grabbed the notepad, adjusted her apron with deliberate calm, and walked to the table with all the professional posture she could muster. "Good evening, sir. Welcome to the Salt Corner." Her voice was as formal as a bank secretary's. "Have you decided what you're ordering?" Dorian looked up from the menu. The confusion on his face was almost adorable. "The usual." "And what would the usual be, sir?" He blinked. "Twice. The steak, with potatoes." "Excellent choice." Callie wrote it down as if it were completely new information. "How would you like your meat cooked?" "Medium." "Side dish?" "The potatoes." "Beverage?" Dorian stared at her as if she'd asked for the theory of relativity in Mandarin. "Water." "Sparkling or still?" "Still." "With ice or without ice?" "With." "Lemon?" "What?" "Lemon." "In the water." "We have lemon. We also have orange, but honestly I don't recommend it because Gus squeezes it by hand and sometimes he forgets to wash first." Dorian opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. "No lemon." "Perfect. Your order will be out in 15 minutes. Callie smiled with a politeness so exaggerated it bordered on teasing. "Anything else?" "No, thank you." She turned and started walking back to the counter, mentally counting the seconds. 1, 2, 3, foo. "Actually." Callie stopped, turned slowly, one eyebrow raised. Dorian had his hand in the air as if he'd forgotten what he was going to say in the middle of the movement. He lowered his hand, raised it again, lowered it. "I wanted to." He cleared his throat. "About yesterday." "Yesterday?" "The question that you asked?" "I asked a question?" Dorian's eyes narrowed slightly. "You know you did." Callie tilted her head, feigning confusion. "Sir, I ask many questions. It's part of the job. What will you order? Want the check? Are you okay?" She paused on the last item with perfect timing. "They're all routine questions." Dorian was silent for a moment, and then, to Callie's absolute surprise, the corner of his mouth curved. Almost a smile. Almost. "Are you always like this?" "Like what?" "Annoyingly clever?" "Only on days that end in Y." This time, Dorian laughed, for real. A short laugh, almost choked, as if his body was still unaccustomed to the sound. But it was real. Callie felt something strange in her chest. A small, stupid victory that shouldn't mean anything. She approached the table again, but this time without the notepad, without the professional barrier. "Look, I don't know what's going on in your life." Her voice was softer now, more honest. "And honestly, it's none of my business. But you've been coming here for 8 months, sitting alone, eating in silence, and leaving as if this restaurant were a teleportation portal to a dimension where feelings don't exist." Dorian didn't respond, but he also didn't look away. It was progress. "Yesterday was the first time you seemed human." She shrugged. "I found it interesting, that's all." The silence between them was different now. It wasn't that polite emptiness from before. It was the kind of silence that happens when two people are deciding whether to keep pretending or not. Dorian broke first. "I don't know how to do this." "Do what?" He made a vague gesture with his hand, encompassing the table, the restaurant, her. "Talk, without a reason." Callie blinked. "Without a reason? Without an agenda, without a goal, without a defined endpoint? You mean, talk just to talk, like normal people do?" "I'm not a normal person. Clearly. Normal people don't align their silverware 4 times before eating." Dorian looked at the silverware. They were perfectly parallel. 3 times, he corrected. "It was 4. I counted." Another almost smile. Callie was starting to enjoy collecting these. She pulled out the chair across from him and sat without asking permission. Dorian looked momentarily alarmed, as if she'd just violated some invisible protocol. What are you doing? Sitting. Shouldn't you be working? My break started 2 minutes ago. It was a lie. There were 20 minutes until her break. I'm going to teach you something, Dorian. He froze when he heard his own name. How do you know my name? Your credit card. Kali rested her elbows on the table. You leave an absurd tip every night. I pay attention to these things. Dorian seemed unsure whether to be flattered or concerned about the amount of information she had about him. The thing I'm going to teach you, Kali continued, is that conversation doesn't need a goal. You can just talk about nothing, about everything, about the fact that the painting back there looks like it was painted by someone having an existential crisis. Dorian turned to look at the faded boat painting. It really is terrible, he agreed. Hadi. Gus bought it at a garage sale for $3. He thinks it's abstract art. That's abstract? That's a crime against aesthetics. Dorian let out a low laugh, and then, as if he'd finally made a decision, his shoulders relaxed. Just a little. But Kali noticed. I don't know the last time someone cared to ask if I was okay, he said, his voice lower. People assume that I'm busy, that I'm focused, that I don't need anything because I have resources. Resources, Kali repeated. Is that what rich people call money? It's how rich people avoid talking about loneliness. The weight of that sentence hung suspended between them. Kali didn't have a joke for that. Sometimes honesty doesn't need a clever response. Well, she said finally, getting up, your steak is going to get cold if I keep sitting here being amazing. But tomorrow you can tell me more about how being rich is hard. I promise to fake sympathy. Dorian watched her walk away. Kali? She stopped. Thank you for asking. Kali smiled over her shoulder. Don't thank me yet. Tomorrow, I'm going to make you try Gus's apple pie. And then you'll know what real suffering is. She disappeared into the kitchen, leaving Dorian alone at table number 7. But for the first time in a long time, alone didn't feel so definitive. He didn't know it yet, but tomorrow would bring something neither of them expected. A broken-down van, a pair of ruined shoes, and the exact moment when everything would truly begin to change. The restaurant's van chose the worst possible moment to give up on life. Kali was in the middle of the intersection of Figueroa Avenue and 7th Street, sweating as if she'd run a marathon, pushing alone a white van that weighed approximately the same as her hopes of one day owning her own car. The vehicle had died without warning, right in the middle of 5 o'clock traffic, and now horns were honking in chorus while drivers shouted things she pretended not to hear. Come on, you old tin can, Kali muttered through her teeth, pushing with her shoulder. I swear if you don't move, I'm selling you to a junkyard and buying a bicycle. The van didn't move. Obviously. Cars swerved honking. A taxi driver shouted something about her blocking the entire city. A lady in a red sedan made a not-so-nice gesture with her hand. Kali was about to accept her fate of being run over by collective frustration when she heard a familiar voice behind her. Do you need help? She turned her head, still leaning against the back of the van, and nearly choked. Dorian Briggs was standing on the sidewalk, impeccable gray suit, shoes that probably cost more than her rent, leather briefcase in hand, and an expression of genuine concern that seemed completely out of place in that scene of urban chaos. What are you doing here? Kali asked, breathless. Coming out of a meeting. He pointed to a mirrored building behind him. What are you doing? Dancing the tango with a van. What does it look like I'm doing? Dorian looked at the vehicle, looked at her, looked at the traffic that continued honking, and then, to Kali's absolute shock, he put his briefcase on the ground and began taking off his jacket. What are you doing? She repeated, helping. In that suit? It's just clothing. It's a suit that probably costs more than my college. You went to college? That's not the point. Dorian folded the jacket with surgical care, because apparently he couldn't do anything in a relaxed way, and placed it on top of the briefcase. Then he rolled up the sleeves of his white shirt and positioned himself next to her at the back of the van. Ready, he said, as if announcing the start of a corporate presentation. Kali stared at him. Have you ever pushed anything in your life? I've pushed difficult decisions in board meetings. That doesn't count. It's surprisingly physical when shareholders disagree, She let out an involuntary laugh. Okay, Tycoon, on the count of 3. 1, 2. They pushed together. The van moved approximately 3 centimeters. Wow, Callie said with sarcasm. Impressive. This thing weighs a ton. It's a delivery van. What did you expect? A motorized bicycle? They pushed again, 5 more centimeters. Dorian was starting to turn red, and Callie noticed with satisfaction that he wasn't used to physical effort that didn't involve pressing elevator buttons. Are you okay there? She teased. Want a break? A glass of imported water? I'm fine, he responded between heavy breaths. You look like you're having a heart attack in slow motion. That's motivational. Thanks. Another push. The van finally started to gain momentum, rolling slowly toward the side of the street. Callie steered while Dorian pushed with a determination she had to admit was somewhat admirable. And then it happened. Dorian's foot slipped on a puddle of oil that neither of them had seen. He lost his balance, his arms spun in the air like an out-of-control windmill, and he fell to his knees right in the middle of the dirt. The silence lasted exactly 2 seconds. Callie looked at him, at the suit's knees stained with oil, at the expensive shoes now decorated with urban mud, at the expression of absolute horror on Dorian's face as he processed what had just happened, and she started to laugh, not a polite giggle. A full-blown laugh, the kind that makes your eyes water and your stomach hurt. This isn't funny, Dorian said, still on the ground. It's very funny, Callie managed to answer between laughs. You fell, like a penguin, on ice. Penguins are graceful. You weren't. Dorian looked at his own hands, now covered in dirt. And then, something unexpected happened. He started to laugh too. A low laugh at first, almost embarrassed. But it grew, fed by the absurdity of the situation, until the two of them were there, she leaning against the van, he kneeling in the dirt, laughing as if the world didn't exist. Callie extended her hand to help him up. Come on, Tycoon, before someone takes a picture and you become internet news. Dorian accepted her hand, and the moment their fingers touched, something changed. The laughter died down slowly, replaced by a sudden awareness of closeness, of her hand in his, of her eyes on his. Callie let go of his hand quickly, as if she'd touched something too hot. The van, she said, clearing her throat. We need to finish pushing. Right. The van. They finished the job in silence, Rat finally parking the problematic vehicle in a side spot. Callie leaned against the side, catching her breath, while Dorian tried to clean the dirt from his hands with a tissue that clearly wasn't up to the task. Thank you, she said, and there was something genuine in her voice now. For the help. You're welcome. You didn't have to do that. Ruin your expensive suit, fall in the dirt, become a walking comedy. I know. Callie studied him for a moment. Why did you do it then? Dorian stopped cleaning his hands. The question seemed to have caught him by surprise. Because you needed help, he said simply. And I was here. The silence that followed was different from the previous ones, heavier, more honest. Callie crossed her arms, an invisible shield going up. In my experience, nobody helps without expecting something in return. What experience is that? Life. She shrugged, but there was a shadow in her eyes. Everyone wants something, Dorian. Always. He watched her for a long moment. I don't want anything. Everyone says that. I'm not everyone. You made that clear when you aligned your silverware 4 times. 3. 4. His almost smile was back. And despite herself, Callie felt the corners of her own mouth curving. Your suit is ruined, she said. I have others. What a waste. It was worth it. The phrase hung suspended between them, loaded with meanings neither of them was ready to explore. Callie moved away from the van, adjusting her dirty apron. I have to get back to the restaurant. Gus is going to make me pay if this van doesn't show up with the deliveries. I can give you a ride. In your millionaire car? With all this dirt? The seats are leather, easy to clean. Callie hesitated, and then shook her head. Thanks, but no. I'll call for a tow truck. She started walking but stopped and turned. Hey, Dorian? Yes? If you show up at the restaurant tonight, I'll let you eat for free, to make up for the suit. You can't do that. You're not the owner. Gus owes me 3 weeks of overtime. He can handle a steak. She winked and disappeared around the corner, leaving Dorian standing next to the broken van, with his ruined suit and a smile he couldn't erase. That night, he showed up at the restaurant at 7:32 p.m., 10 minutes earlier than normal. And for the first time, he didn't sit at table number 7. He sat at the counter, right in front of where Callie worked. Callie almost dropped her tray when she saw Dorian sitting at the counter. Not at table number 7. Not in the dark corner where he'd been hiding for 8 months. At the counter, 2 meters from her, looking directly at where she worked as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "You're in the wrong place," she said, approaching cautiously. "Am I?" "Your table is over there." She pointed to the corner. "Number 7, horrible painting, your comfort zone." "I thought I could change." "Change? You? The man who orders the same dish for 8 months? People change. In 3 days?" Dorian shrugged, and there was something almost mischievous in his eyes. Callie didn't know if she found it charming or concerning. "You said I could eat for free today," he reminded her, "to make up for the suit." "I did say that, didn't I?" "You did." Callie sighed, looked at the clock. There were 20 minutes left until the end of her shift, and Gus was already putting away the pots in the kitchen. An idea came to her mind, a probably stupid idea. "Come with me," she said. "Where to?" "Do you want the free dinner or not?" Before he could answer, she was already walking toward the back of the restaurant. Dorian hesitated for exactly 2 seconds before following her. And that's how Dorian Briggs ended up sitting on a plastic bucket turned upside down in the middle of a kitchen that smelled like fried onions and questionable decisions. "Is this sanitary?" he asked, looking at the bucket with suspicion. The word sauce was written in permanent marker on the side. It was washed. Callie lit the stove with the ease of someone who did this in their sleep. "Probably. Probably. Do you want free dinner or do you want a sanitary inspection report?" Dorian opened his mouth to respond, but decided it was safer to stay quiet. The kitchen was tiny. Pots hanging on rusty hooks, a refrigerator that made a suspicious noise every 30 seconds, and a window that faced an alley where someone had parked a bicycle without a wheel. It was the complete opposite of any place Dorian frequented, and strangely he was enjoying it. "What are you going to make?" he asked, watching Callie gather ingredients. "Pastel." "Pastel?" "Yes, pastel, food, fried dough with filling. You know what a pastel is, right?" "I know what a pastel is. Are you sure? Because you're looking at this dough like it's a corporate merger contract." Dorian looked at the dough she was rolling out. It was yellowish, thin, and honestly looked like an alien document. "My grandmother's recipe," Callie continued, working while she talked. "She made it every Sunday when I was a child. Passed down to my mother. Passed down to me. Family heritage in fried form." "Does your grandmother still make it?" "She passed away 5 years ago." Her voice didn't tremble, but Dorian noticed an almost invisible pause in her hands. "I'm sorry." "Don't be. She lived to 87, danced salsa until 85, and died in her sleep after eating 3 pastels. Callie smiled. "If I have half her luck, I'm already ahead." She placed the filling in the dough with practiced movements, folded the edges, and dipped the pastel in the hot oil. The sizzle filled the kitchen. "And you?" she asked without looking at him. "Family dinners?" The silence lasted too long. Callie turned to look at him. Dorian was staring at the floor as if the cracks in it were fascinating. "Dorian?" "I don't have many memories of having dinner with anyone," he finally said. "My parents worked a lot. I ate dinner alone most nights, with the babysitter when there was one, with the television when there wasn't. And now I eat dinner alone by choice." He gave a humorless smile. "Or at least that's what I told myself." Callie took the pastel out of the oil, placed it on a paper plate, and handed it to him. "Well, today you're having dinner with me, on a bucket, in the back kitchen of a questionable restaurant." She smiled. "It's better, isn't it?" Dorian looked at the pastel, looked at her, and something in his eyes softened. "It's better," he agreed quietly. He took the pastel with both hands, as if it were a precious relic, and then tried to cut it with the side of the plastic fork Callie had given him. She watched for 3 seconds before starting to laugh. "What are you doing?" "Cutting." "You don't cut a pastel. You bite it. But it's hot. That's how it works. You blow on it and bite, like a normal human being. I could burn myself. You could also get run over crossing the street, but that doesn't stop you from leaving the house." Dorian stared at her with an expression of slight indignation. Then, with all the dignity he could muster, he raised the pastel to his mouth. blue as if he were blowing out birthday candles, and took a tiny bite. The expression on his face changed instantly. He stopped chewing. This is incredible. I know. No, you don't understand. This is genuinely the best thing I've ever eaten. You eat at $200 a plate restaurants, and none of them taste like this. Callie felt her face heat up and pretended to be busy putting away ingredients. It's just a pastel. It's not just a pastel, He took another bite, bigger this time. It's like there's history inside. She stopped moving. That phrase caught her off guard. My grandmother used to say that, Callie murmured, that real food carries history, memory, affection. She was right. Their eyes met. The kitchen seemed to have shrunk, the air denser, the silence more present. Callie realized she was holding her breath. Dorian noticed too. Callie, The kitchen door burst open. Callie, did you see where I put the... Gus stopped mid-sentence, looking at the scene. Callie standing. Dorian sitting on a bucket. Oil still hot on the stove. What's going on here? Nothing, Callie said too quickly. Why is there a customer in my kitchen? He's not a customer. I mean, he is, but why is he sitting on the sauce bucket? It was washed, Dorian offered. Gus looked at him, looked at Callie, looked at the half-eaten pastel. Is this the steak guy? Gus? The guy who comes every day and never talks to anyone? Gus, please. The guy Marcy thinks is a spy? Dorian raised an eyebrow. Spy? I don't think you're a spy, Callie said quickly. Marcy thinks so. She also thinks the moon is fake, so don't take it seriously. Gus crossed his arms, but there was an amused gleam in his eyes. Well, spy, if you're going to stay in my kitchen, at least wash the pots. He pointed to the pile in the sink. Callie, your shift ended 10 minutes ago. And then he left, leaving the door swinging. The silence lasted 2 seconds. Dorian looked at the pile of pots, looked at Callie. He was joking, right? With Gus, you never know. Dorian finished the pastel in silence. When he was done, he stood up from the bucket with impressive dignity for someone who had spent 20 minutes sitting on a sauce container. Thank you, he said, for dinner, for the story, for showing me that food can be more than nutrition. Wow, what a tycoon phrase. I am a tycoon. Phrases like that are expected. Callie laughed and realized with a jolt that she was really laughing, not out of politeness, not for work, because she wanted to. Tomorrow, Dorian said, walking to the door. I'm taking you to dinner. I work tomorrow. After work. It'll be late. I know places that are open late. Callie crossed her arms. What kind of places? Dorian smiled. A real smile, full, that transformed his entire face. Places that aren't $200 restaurants, I promise. He left before she could respond. Callie stood in the empty kitchen, the smell of fried food still in the air, the sauce bucket in the corner, as a silent witness. She didn't know what was happening between them. But for the first time in a long time, she wanted to find out. What she didn't know was that someone else was also about to find out. And that person had perfectly painted nails, a poisonous smile, and a past with Dorian that wasn't over yet. The next day, Callie still couldn't stop thinking about the dinner in the kitchen. The pastel, the sauce bucket, Dorian's smile when he said he was going to take her to dinner somewhere that didn't cost $200. She had spent the entire night tossing and turning in bed, trying to convince herself that it didn't mean anything. He was just a strange customer, a lonely millionaire, no big deal. So why had she tried on 3 different blouses before coming to work? Pathetic. The shift started quietly. Callie looked at the door every 5 minutes, pretending she wasn't looking. Pretending she wasn't waiting for anyone specific. At 7:42 p.m., the door opened. Dorian walked in with his annoyingly precise timing, waved discreetly at her and sat at the counter, no longer at table number 7. That was already becoming a habit. A dangerous and pleasant habit that Callie didn't want to admit she was enjoying. The usual? She asked, approaching. The usual. You know the menu has other options, right? I like consistency. You like boredom. Boredom is underrated. Callie rolled her eyes, but she was smiling when she turned to write down the order. It was at 8:15 that everything changed. The woman who walked into the salt corner looked like she'd gotten the address wrong by about 15 neighborhoods. The door opened and a cloud of expensive perfume invaded the restaurant as if it owned the place. High heels that probably cost more than the broken van. Blonde hair so perfectly styled it looked computer-edited, and a tight red dress that screamed "Look at me" in at least 7 languages. All the customers stopped eating. Gus almost dropped a pot. Marcy, in the kitchen, whispered, "My God, it's a celebrity," loud enough for everyone to hear. The woman walked through the restaurant as if she were on a runway, her eyes sweeping each table with a mixture of disgust and scientific curiosity, as if she were studying a rare species of insect. And then her gaze stopped on Dorian, who was sitting at the counter, right in front of Callie. "Dorian." Her voice was high-pitched, musical, and completely fake. "I knew I'd find you here." Callie saw the color drain from Dorian's face. Not from surprise, from something worse. From recognition. "Brielle," he said, and the name came out like a bad medical diagnosis. "Darling." Brielle approached and planted a kiss in the air near his cheek, the kind of kiss rich people give when they don't really want to touch anyone. "It's been so long. You completely disappeared from the social circuit. People are talking." "I've been busy." Clearly. Her eyes slid to Callie with the subtlety of a snake assessing a mouse. "Busy with new hobbies." Callie kept her expression neutral. Years of work as a waitress had taught her how to deal with unpleasant customers. Smile, nod, pretend you're not imagining pouring soup in their lap. "Can I help you with something?" Callie asked with rehearsed professionalism. "Menu? Water? Map to the right neighborhood?" Brielle blinked. Once, twice. "Sorry, you are?" "The waitress." "Oh." Brielle's smile widened in a way that didn't come close to reaching her eyes. How lovely. Dorian always had such a generous heart for the working class. Callie felt her jaw lock. "Brielle," Dorian said in a warning tone. "What? I'm complimenting." Brielle sat on the stool next to him without being invited. "It's beautiful to see you connecting with ordinary people. Very humble of you." "I'm an ordinary person," Callie said. "I work, pay bills, watch bad shows on weekends. Nothing too exotic." "I'm sure you're not." Brielle crossed her legs with studied elegance. "So, you and Dorian are friends?" The pause before friends was loaded with insinuation. "Customer and employee," Callie responded. "It's a complex relationship based on exchanging food for money. Very advanced." Dorian coughed something that sounded suspiciously like a disguised laugh. Brielle didn't find it funny. "Funny." She tilted her head, studying Callie like someone evaluating a clearance item. "You know, I've seen this before. Waitresses, secretaries, assistants, they all think they'll be the exception. That they'll win the Prince Charming's heart by serving French fries." "Brielle, that's enough," Dorian said, his voice harder now. "I'm being honest, darling. Someone needs to be." She turned her venomous gaze to Callie. "Don't take it personally. It's just that you're not exactly his type. Dorian frequents charity galas, dinners with senators, events in Malibu. You frequent." She looked around the restaurant with disdain. "This." Callie rested her elbows on the counter and smiled. "You know what I find fascinating?" Brielle raised a perfectly drawn eyebrow. "What?" "You walked into a restaurant you clearly considered disgusting, in a neighborhood that's obviously not yours, dressed like you're going to a red carpet, just to find an ex-boyfriend who eats dinner alone eating cheap steak." Callie tilted her head. "That says a lot more about you than about me." The silence that followed was delicious. Brielle opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. "I didn't." "And another thing," Callie continued, relentless. "You may have shampoo commercial hair and a magazine dress, but you're sitting here on a plastic stool, trying to intimidate a waitress you just met. If that's not insecurity disguised as superiority, I don't know what is." Marcy, who had appeared in the kitchen doorway to watch, let out a low "ooh" that echoed through the restaurant. Dorian was looking at Callie as if she'd just solved an impossible equation. Brielle stood up, her face red matching the dress. "Dorian, are you going to let her talk to me like that?" "She didn't say anything that wasn't true," he replied calmly. Brielle's jaw dropped. "You're kidding. Why did you come here exactly?" Dorian turned to face her. "We broke up 2 years ago. You made it very clear that I was emotionally unavailable and incapable of prioritizing relationships. Your words. I was angry when I said that. You were right." Brielle blinked, confused. "What? I was emotionally unavailable. I'm still working on it." Dorian looked briefly at Callie, and there was something vulnerable in that look. "But that's not your business anymore." "Dorian?" "Good night, Brielle." It was a dismissal, Clear, polite, but final. Brielle stood there for a moment, processing, then her face closed into something cold and calculated. "You're going to regret this," she said quietly. "Both of you." And then she turned on her expensive heels and marched to the door, the perfume leaving a poisonous trail through the restaurant. The door slammed. The silence lasted 3 seconds. "Wow," Marcy said from the kitchen. "That was better than a soap opera." "Marcy, get back to work," Gus shouted from somewhere. Callie let out the air she didn't know she was holding. Her hands were shaking slightly, adrenaline still running. "I'm sorry," Dorian said. "For her, for all of that. You didn't do anything, but it was my past that showed up to haunt your present." "Pasts do that," Callie shrugged. "Mine shows up in the form of overdue bills. Yours shows up in the form of showroom dolls with poison in their purse." Dorian let out a surprised laugh. "Showroom doll? Did you see that dress? It was brighter than my financial future." He laughed again, and this time the sound was light, genuine, without the weight it normally carried. "Callie? Thank you for not letting yourself be intimidated. Please, I deal with drunk customers at 2 a.m. A jealous ex-girlfriend is nothing." Dorian watched her for a long moment. There was something new in his eyes, something that looked dangerously like admiration. "Is dinner still on?" he asked. "After your shift?" Callie pretended to consider. "Depends. Will there be more ex-girlfriends showing up dramatically?" "I hope not." "Then it's on." She went back to work, pretending her heart wasn't beating faster than normal. What she didn't see was Brielle standing on the other side of the street, phone in hand, eyes fixed on the restaurant window. Some people don't accept dismissals gracefully. And Brielle Stanton had just declared war. Callie's shift ended at 11 p.m., and Dorian was still there. After the hurricane named Brielle, he had stayed at the counter, eating his steak in silence while Callie served other customers. It wasn't a strange silence. It was the kind of comfortable silence of two people who had just survived a battle together and didn't need words to process it. When she took off her apron and put away her notepad, he got up from the stool as if he'd been waiting for that moment all night. "Ready?" he asked. "For what?" "Dinner, I promised." Callie looked at the clock on the wall. 11:03. "Dorian, it's 11 o'clock. What restaurant is open now?" "I know some places." "Like what? Exclusive clubs with 6-month waiting lists?" "I was thinking of something more discreet." "Discreet?" Callie crossed her arms. "Does that mean an armored car with a driver and champagne in the cup holder?" Dorian opened his mouth to respond, but hesitated. "Maybe." "I knew it." "What's wrong with comfort?" "Nothing. If you're a diplomat fleeing a war zone." Callie grabbed her purse from the employee locker. "Look, I appreciate the invitation, but I'm not the type of person who's comfortable in places where you need 3 forms of identification to get in." Dorian watched her for a moment. "Then you choose." Callie stopped. "What? The place. You choose." He shrugged, trying to look casual and failing miserably. "I'm up for anything. Anything? Anything. Even if it's strange? Especially if it's strange." Callie studied his face, looking for signs of anticipated regret. She found none. A slow smile spread across her face. "Okay, Tycoon, but don't say I didn't warn you." 20 minutes later, they were standing in front of a taco stand on the corner of Alvarado Street and 7th. The stand was small, noisy, and had a line of at least 15 people who clearly didn't care that it was past midnight. The smell of seasoned meat and grilled onions hung in the air like an invitation. Christmas lights blinked around the awning, even though it was the middle of March. Dorian was looking at the scene as if he'd just landed on another planet. "This is," he began, "beautiful, magical, the best place in the world? I was going to say unexpected. Unexpected is good. Unexpected means you're learning." They got in line. Dorian was visibly uncomfortable, adjusting his jacket collar as if that would protect him from something. "Relax," Callie said. "Nobody here knows who you are." "That's not it." "Then what is it?" Dorian looked at the stand, at the people eating standing up, at the cook's hands handling the food without gloves. "Is it sanitary?" Callie let out a laugh so loud that the woman in front of them turned to look. "My God, you really are from another world." "It's a valid question. Dorian, this place has been around for 30 years. If it wasn't sanitary, it would have closed already. Or people developed immunity. Do you want to leave?" He looked at her, at the challenging smile on her face, at the eyes shining under the blinking Christmas lights. "No," he said, "I want to stay." When it was their turn, Callie ordered 4 tacos, 2 beef, 2 chicken, and 2 bottles of Mexican soda that Dorian had never seen in his life. "What is this?" he asked, holding the bottle as if it were an archaeological artifact. "Soda. Orange, made with real sugar, not that chemical substitute you rich people use to pretend you're being healthy." "I don't pretend to be healthy." "You align silverware and eat the same dish for 8 months. That's the behavior of someone who controls everything. Or someone who found what works. Or someone who's afraid to try new things." Dorian opened his mouth to retort, but Callie was already pushing a taco toward him. "Eat." He looked at the taco, looked at his hands, looked at the taco again. "I don't have," he made a vague gesture, "protection." "Protection? For my hands." Callie blinked. "You want gloves to eat a taco? It would be more sanitary. Dorian, it's your own hands touching your own food, going to your own mouth. But I touched things before." "Like what? Contaminated corporate documents? The car door, the stair railing, the stand counter." Callie reached into her purse, pulled out a small pack of wet wipes and tossed it to him. "Here, clean your hands and stop being dramatic." Dorian cleaned his hands with a dedication that bordered on surgical. 3 wipes, both sides, between the fingers. Callie watched with a mixture of horror and fascination. "You're unbelievable." "I'm careful." "You're neurotic." They're synonyms. Finally satisfied with the level of cleanliness, Dorian picked up the taco, studied it for a moment, and then took a bite. The expression on his face changed instantly. He stopped chewing. "This is incredible." "I know. No, you don't understand." He took another bite, bigger. "This is genuinely one of the best things I've ever eaten." "Better than a $200 restaurant?" "Much better." Callie smiled, satisfied. They ate in silence for a moment, leaning against a pole, watching the city go by. It was almost 1 in the morning, but the street was still alive. Cars, people, music coming from somewhere. "You know what's strange?" Dorian said suddenly. "What?" "I don't remember the last time I laughed like this." Callie turned to look at him. "Like what?" "Loud. For real. Without calculating if it was appropriate or professional." He looked at the taco in his hands, as if the answer was there. "I spend so much time controlling everything that I forgot what it's like to let go. And now? Now I'm eating street tacos at 1 in the morning with a waitress who called me neurotic." He smiled, and it was a real smile, full, that transformed his entire face. "And I don't want to be anywhere else." Callie felt her heart do something strange in her chest, something she wasn't ready to name. "You have sauce," she said, pointing, "on the corner of your mouth." Dorian tried to wipe it, but missed. "Did I get it?" "No." He tried again, missed again. Before she could think, Callie reached out and wiped the sauce with her thumb. The touch lasted 2 seconds, maybe 3, but the air between them changed completely. Dorian stood still, his eyes fixed on hers. Callie realized too late what she had done, the intimacy of the gesture, the closeness. She pulled her hand back as if she'd been shocked. "There," she said, her voice strangely hoarse, "clean. Thank you." The silence that followed was loaded with something unspoken. Callie cleared her throat. "I should go. I have an early shift tomorrow. I'll drive you." "You don't have to." "I want to." They walked to his car, which was parked 2 blocks away, probably costing more than the entire taco stand. The ride to Callie's apartment was silent, but not uncomfortable. When she got out, Dorian rolled down the window. "Callie? Thank you for tonight, for showing me that there are things beyond what I knew." She smiled. "Anytime, Tycoon. Tomorrow I'll teach you how to eat a hot dog from a cart. I can't wait." She climbed the building stairs, feeling his eyes on her back, until the door closed. What neither of them knew was that, a few miles away, Brielle Stanton was awake, scrolling through Callie's social media profile, putting together a plan that would make them both wish they'd never met. Callie didn't notice when it became routine. It just happened. The night after the tacos, Dorian showed up at the restaurant at 7:42. The next night, at 7:38. The following one, at 7:25. It was as if he were testing his own limits, arriving earlier and earlier, staying longer and longer. And the strangest part? He didn't always eat. "Are you going to order something?" Callie asked on the 5th consecutive night, standing in front of him with the notepad in hand. I'm still deciding. You've been looking at the menu for 40 minutes. It's a complex menu. It has 12 items, and you always order the same thing. Maybe today I want to change it up. You're not going to change it up. You don't know that. Dorian, you used 3 wipes to clean your hands before eating a taco. You're not exactly the type who embraces change. He looked up from the menu, and there was something amused there. Steak with potatoes. I know. Callie wrote down the order she already knew by heart and went to the kitchen, trying to ignore the smile that insisted on appearing on her own face. This was dangerous. She knew it was dangerous, but she couldn't stop. The nights began to stretch. At first, it was just the dinners. Then Dorian started waiting for her to finish her shift. He'd sit at the counter, pretend to read something on his phone, and when she took off her apron, he was there. Don't you have a home? She asked one night as she locked the back door. I do. And don't you have things to do there? Like counting money? Swimming in gold coins? That's an offensive stereotype. Is it true? I don't swim in coins. It's too noisy. Callie laughed, and the sound echoed through the empty parking lot. They started walking together after her shift. No destination. No rush. Just walking through the streets of Los Angeles while the city slept and woke up at the same time. It was on one of these walks that Callie decided it was time to expand his education. Okay, lesson number 1, she said, stopping under a streetlight. Basic survival slang. I don't need slang. You talk like a legal document. You do. Dorian crossed his arms, but there was curiosity in his look. Okay, teach me. First word, dude. Dude. Yeah, like friend, buddy, person you like. Dude, Dorian repeated as if he were learning an alien language. Now use it in a sentence. What do you mean? I don't know. Say something you'd say to a friend. Dorian thought for a moment too long. Dear dude, I would like to inform you that. No. Callie was laughing so hard she had to lean against the pole. My God, that was the most corporate thing I've ever heard. What's wrong with it? You can't mix dear with dude. It's like putting ketchup on sushi. People do that. Wrong people do that. Dorian frowned, genuinely confused. So how do I use it? Like, hey dude, what's up? Or thanks dude. Natural, casual. Hey dude, Dorian tried with all the naturalness of a robot learning human emotions. That was better. You're lying. Totally. They laughed together, and Callie realized she was enjoying these moments too much. Too much to be safe. The weeks passed. The conversations got longer, deeper. Dorian began to share things. Fragments of his lonely childhood, the pressure of building an empire, the emptiness that no success could fill. And Callie listened. Because that's what she did. She listened, responded with jokes, and pretended she wasn't falling in love, little by little. It was on a Tuesday night that everything almost changed. They were leaning against the back door of the restaurant, waiting for a storm to pass. The rain was falling hard, creating a curtain of water that isolated the two of them from the rest of the world. You're wet, Dorian said. So are you. I know, it's uncomfortable. You're uncomfortable with everything. Not everything. Callie turned to look at him. He was closer than she'd realized. Close enough for her to see the raindrops in his hair, on his eyelashes, on the curve of his jaw. What are you comfortable with? She asked, her voice lower than she intended. With you. The answer was simple, direct, and completely unexpected. The air between them became dense. Callie felt her heart race, her stomach knot, all the cliched sensations she'd always thought were exaggerated in romantic movies. Dorian leaned in, just a little, enough for her to feel the warmth of his breath. Callie pulled back. I can't, she said, her voice trembling. Dorian stopped immediately. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to. That's not it. She ran her hand through her wet hair, frustrated. It's just, I don't know what this is. For you. What do you mean? I'm a waitress, Dorian. You're you. She gestured vaguely in his direction. Billionaire, CEO, owner of things I can't even pronounce. That doesn't matter. It does matter. Callie looked at him, and there was pain in her eyes. Old pain from someone who'd been hurt before. I don't want to be a rich guy's temporary story, the fun chapter you tell at fancy dinners. Remember that time I dated a waitress? What a phase. Callie, I've seen it happen. Her voice was firmer now, more defensive. Girls like me who think they're special, who think they'll be the exception. And then one day the guy wakes up and realizes he wants someone from the same world. Someone who knows which fork to use at a gala dinner. I don't care about forks. You align them 4 times before eating. 3. Dorian, that's not the point. He was silent for a moment. The rain kept falling, deafening, and at the same time comforting. You want to know what I see? He finally said. When I look at you? Callie didn't respond. I see the first person in years who asked me if I was okay. The first person who made me really laugh. The first person who made me want to be more than a name on corporate documents. He took a step toward her, but didn't try to touch her. I don't know what this is. I don't know where it's going, but I know it's not temporary, at least not for me. Callie felt her eyes sting. What if you change your mind? What if you change yours? I won't change. Then we're the same. The silence stretched between them, loaded with unexplored possibilities. I need time, Callie finally said, to think. I'll wait. It might take a while. I'll wait anyway. She nodded, unable to look at him. The rain was slowing down, the world coming back to exist around them. Good night, Dorian. Good night, Callie. She went into the restaurant through the back door, her heart heavy and light at the same time. What she didn't know was that, while she was thinking about possibilities, Brielle Stanton was about to destroy them all. And the first message was already being posted. Callie woke up with her phone vibrating nonstop. It was 7 in the morning. Her shift didn't start until 5 in the afternoon. There was no logical reason for someone to be texting at that hour. Unless the world was ending or her mother had figured out how to use the family group chat again. She grabbed the phone with her eyes still closed. 17 messages. 8 notifications from a social media network she barely used. 3 missed calls from Marcy. Something was very wrong. Marcy's first message said only don't go on the internet. The second, seriously, don't go on. The third, okay, you probably already went on. Call me. Callie felt her stomach sink. With trembling fingers, she opened the app, and there it was. A post from Brielle Stanton. Verified. 200,000 followers, with a photo of Callie taken from far away, probably that night at the restaurant. The text said, Waitress hooks billionaire by serving French fries. Is it love or investment? Some people will do anything for social climbing. 1,200 comments. 4,000 shares. Callie dropped the phone on the bed as if it burned. When she arrived at the restaurant at 4 in the afternoon, an hour early because she couldn't stay home, chaos had already set in. There were people standing on the sidewalk taking pictures. A woman with a huge phone asked if she was the billionaire's waitress. A guy in a cap offered $50 for an interview. Callie walked past everyone without responding, her face burning. Inside the restaurant wasn't any better. Gus was behind the counter with an expression that mixed concern and discomfort. Marcy came running as soon as she saw her. I tried to warn you, she whispered. That woman is a monster. I saw. Customers won't stop talking about it. Table 4 asked if you can autograph their napkin. What? I said no, but Table 7 wants to know if Dorian is coming today and if they can take a picture. Callie closed her eyes for a moment, trying to breathe. Where's Gus? Hiding in the kitchen. He doesn't know how to deal with drama. Said he's staying there until this craziness passes. Callie walked to the dining room, and it was like crossing a minefield of stairs. All the customers were watching her. Some with curiosity, others with judgment, a few with pity, and those were the worst. A lady at table 3 waved at her. Dear, are you the girl from the article? There was no article, Callie said in a controlled voice. It was just an internet post. Oh, but I read everything. The lady leaned forward, her eyes shining with excitement. Is it true he gave you a diamond necklace on the first date? What? No. And that you two ran away together to Las Vegas? We ate tacos at a street stand. Tacos? The lady seemed disappointed. That's it. That's it. The internet version was more interesting. Callie walked away before she said something she'd regret. The shift was a nightmare. Every 5 minutes someone asked a question. A teenager asked to take a selfie. A man in a suit asked if she was available for other billionaires. A woman asked what the secret was to hooking a rich guy because she'd been trying for years without success. By 8 p.m., Callie was at her limit. That's when she saw the kitchen staff standing at the door, looking at her. Marcy? Benny. Even Gus, who had finally come out of hiding, they weren't laughing. They weren't asking questions. They were looking at her with pity. And that was worse than any mean comment. Callie felt the air leave her lungs. She mumbled something about needing a minute and ran to the employee bathroom. She locked the door, leaned against the cold wall, and cried. It wasn't the dramatic movie kind of crying. It was silent, muffled, the kind you learn to do when you don't want anyone to hear. Tears ran down her face while she bit her fist to muffle the sobs. She had spent years building a simple life, working hard, not asking anyone for anything. And now, because of a few weeks with a guy she didn't even know was her boyfriend, everything was falling apart. There was a knock on the bathroom door. Callie? It was Marcy's voice. Dorian is here. Callie quickly wiped her face. Tell him I can't talk right now. He looks worried. Marcy, please. There was a pause. Okay? Callie waited 5 minutes, 10, 15. When she finally came out of the bathroom, Dorian was still there, sitting at the counter, his face tense with worry. He stood up as soon as he saw her. Callie, I saw what she posted. I've already contacted my lawyers. We can... No. What? I said no. Her voice was firm, but her eyes were still red. I don't want lawyers. I don't want lawsuits. I don't want any more of this. But she can't just... She already did, Dorian. It's already done. Callie crossed her arms, protecting herself. And it's going to keep happening. As long as I'm near you, there will always be someone wanting to destroy me. I can protect you. You can't protect me from being who I am. She let out a bitter laugh. A waitress? No money, no connections, nothing that makes me belong in your world. You belong in my world because I want you in it. But I don't want to. The words came out before she could stop them. I don't want to be a joke. I don't want people to look at me with pity. I don't want to spend the rest of my life proving I'm not with you for money. The silence between them was devastating. What are you saying? Dorian asked, his voice low. I'm saying this was a mistake. Callie felt the tears come back, but refused to let them fall. We both knew it was. We just pretended we didn't. Callie, please leave. No. Dorian, no. He took a step toward her. I'm not leaving because one mean person posted lies on the internet. I'm not giving up because it got difficult. But I am. Callie stepped back. I'm giving up because I need to protect myself, and you should understand that. The pain on his face was almost unbearable to see. You don't have to do this alone. I've always done everything alone. She forced a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Why would it be different now? Callie turned her back and returned to the dining room, leaving Dorian standing in the hallway. She didn't look back. She couldn't. Because if she did, she would change her mind. And changing her mind meant getting hurt even more. What she didn't know was that Brielle was just getting started, and the next move was going to hit not just Callie's heart, but Dorian's entire company. 3 days, 72 hours, 4,320 minutes. That's how much time had passed since Callie sent Dorian away. She knew because she was counting, not intentionally. Her brain simply refused to stop doing the math, like a broken clock that can't forget the last time recorded. The restaurant had returned to normal. The curious onlookers had left. Brielle's post had been swallowed by the next internet scandal, and life went on. Callie served tables, smiled at customers, pretended everything was fine. Table number 7 remained empty every night. It was on the 4th night that everything changed again. Callie was cleaning the counter when Marcy came running from the kitchen, phone in hand and eyes wide. You need to see this. If it's one more thing about me on the internet, I swear, it's not about you, it's about him. Marcy turned the phone screen. It was a business news site, one of those Callie would normally ignore. The headline read, Tech company CEO accused of leaking confidential documents to competitors, and below a photo of Dorian. Callie's stomach dropped. Is this true? I don't know, but it's everywhere. Callie took Marcy's phone and started reading. The accusations were serious. Leaked internal documents, confidential information sold, possible Securities and Exchange Commission investigation. Shareholders were demanding answers. The company was in crisis. And in the middle of all this, a sentence that made Callie's heart stop. Internal sources suggest the leak may be connected to the CEO's recent personal relationships. Recent personal relationships, her. This is a lie, Callie said, more to herself than to Marcy. He wouldn't do this. Are you sure? I am. And she was. Despite everything, despite the pain and confusion, she knew Dorian. He was many things. Controlling, neurotic, obsessed with aligning silverware, but he wasn't dishonest. Someone is setting him up. The following days were strange. Dorian didn't show up at the restaurant, didn't text, didn't call. It was as if he'd evaporated from the face of the earth, which, considering he was in the middle of a corporate scandal, made sense. But the silence hurt more than Callie wanted to admit. She tried to convince herself it was better this way, that she had ended everything precisely to avoid this kind of situation. That distance was protection. But at night, when the restaurant was empty and she was alone cleaning tables, the emptiness at table number 7 seemed to scream. It was on the 6th night that something interesting happened. 2 men in suits walked into the restaurant at 9 p.m. It wasn't uncommon. Executives sometimes showed up for a quick dinner. But these 2 had something different. Nervous looks, low voices. And when they sat at the table near the window, they only ordered coffee. Callie didn't pay much attention at first. She was too busy pretending she didn't care about the news on the corner TV, showing another update about the Briggs scandal. But then she heard a name. Brielle. Callie froze halfway to the kitchen. Discreetly, she began cleaning the table next to them, pretending to be busy while sharpening her ears. She guaranteed it would work, one of the men was saying, his voice low but not low enough. Said she had access to everything. And now, if they discover the connection, they won't discover it, she's careful, and the IT guy already deleted the traces. Still, if Briggs finds out she was behind it, he won't find out. He's too busy trying to save his own company. Callie felt her blood run cold. Brielle, access, leak. The pieces began to fit together in her head like a macabre puzzle. She slowly moved away, her heart beating so hard she was sure they could hear it. She went to the kitchen, grabbed her phone and wrote down everything she heard. Dates, phrases, descriptions of the men. It wasn't proof. Not yet. But it was something. When she returned to the dining room, the men had already left. They left $10 on the table, generous tip for 2 coffees, and no trace besides the empty cups. Callie looked at the TV in the corner. The news was still talking about Dorian. They showed images of him entering a building, surrounded by reporters, his face tense and closed. CEOs are all the same when they get nervous, Marcy commented, walking past her. Look at his face. Looks like he swallowed a lemon. He didn't do this, Callie said quietly. What? Nothing. That night, Callie couldn't sleep. She lay tossing and turning in bed, staring at the ceiling, thinking about Dorian, about Brielle, about the men in suits, about the conversation she'd heard. She had broken up with him to protect herself, to avoid being dragged into his world. And now, ironically, it was precisely that world that was falling apart, and she had information that could help. The question was, what would she do with it? Dorian had chosen to stay away. He hadn't reached out to her, hadn't asked for help. Maybe he was trying to protect her too, or maybe he'd simply given up. Callie picked up her phone, opened the conversation with him. The last message was from 4 days ago, a simple, "I understand." "I'm sorry," that he'd sent after she asked him to leave. She started typing a message, deleted it, typed again, deleted it. "This is ridiculous," she muttered to herself. But she couldn't press send. Because sending a message meant admitting she cared. It meant going back on her decision. It meant exposing herself again to the possibility of being hurt. And Callie had already been hurt too much. She put the phone on the nightstand and closed her eyes. Tomorrow. She'd decide tomorrow. But the universe had other plans, because the next morning her phone rang at 6 a.m. It was an unknown number, and the voice on the other end said something that changed everything. "Miss Rivera? This is from the legal office of Briggs Company. We need to talk to you. It's urgent." Callie hung up the phone and stared at the wall for exactly 30 seconds. Legal office. Urgent. Miss Rivera. Nobody had ever called her Miss Rivera. Not even the bank manager when she was late on her credit card for 3 consecutive months. She called back. Found out they only wanted to confirm if she had any information about the relationship with Dorian that could be used against him in the case. It was protocol, they said. Legal protection. Callie said she had nothing. Hung up. And then sat on the bed, her heart racing, a decision forming in her head. She had information. Not about Dorian, about who was destroying him. And she wasn't going to stand by and watch. The next 48 hours were the strangest of Callie Rivera's life. First, she went back to the restaurant with a new notebook and a mission. Every time someone in a suit walked in, she paid attention. She wrote down faces, times, conversation fragments. Marcy thought she'd gone crazy. "Are you okay?" Marcy asked on the second night, watching Callie scribble furiously on a napkin. "I'm great." "You're taking notes on a paper napkin. It's an organizational system. It's a sign you need a vacation." Callie ignored her, kept watching. On the third night, the men in suits came back. This time, Callie was prepared. She had her phone in her apron pocket, the recording app open, and an excuse ready to stay near their table as long as possible. "More coffee?" she asked, approaching with the pot. "No, thank you," one of them said without looking at her. "Perfect." People who don't look at waitresses also don't notice when waitresses stay too close. Callie pretended to clean the table next to them while catching fragments of the conversation. She said the IT guy confirmed. The documents already went to her lawyer. "If Briggs doesn't fall by Friday, we'll need another plan." Friday. 3 days. Callie went back to the kitchen with her heart in her throat and 23 seconds of audio on her phone. It wasn't much, but it was something. The problem was what to do with it. She had no connections, no lawyers, no access to the corporate world where Dorian was being destroyed. All she had was a phone with bad audio, a notebook full of confusing notes, and a determination that bordered on madness. The next night, Callie set up her investigation headquarters. On her apartment kitchen table, it was pathetic. Colorful post-its stuck on the wall, lines of string connecting names and dates, a ketchup bottle serving as a paperweight because she didn't have anything better. And in the center of it all, a photo of Brielle she'd printed from the internet. "Okay," Callie said to herself, looking at the organized chaos. "Let's review." She had the conversation she heard the first night, mentioning Brielle and access, the recording from the second conversation mentioning the IT guy and documents, and a theory that Brielle had used some disgruntled employee to leak information and destroy Dorian. What she didn't have: concrete proof, credibility, any reason for anyone to believe a waitress who could barely pay rent. The phone rang. It was Marcy. "What are you doing?" "Investigating." "Investigating what?" "The fall of corporate capitalism." "Are you okay?" "Never been better." "Callie, you're scaring me." "Marcy, I need a favor." Silence on the other end. "What kind of favor? Do you still have that cousin who works with technology? Kevin, the one who got arrested for hacking into the school system to change his grades?" "That's the one." "Why?" "I need him to help me track some things." "Callie, this is crazy." "I know. You could get in trouble." "I know. Dorian isn't even talking to you." "I know," Callie sighed, "but I can't stand by watching him be destroyed for something he didn't do. Not when I know who did it." Marcy was silent for a long moment. "Kevin charges $50 an hour. I have 120 in savings. That gives you 2.5 hours. It'll have to be enough." Kevin, Marcy's hacker cousin, was exactly what Callie expected. A 25-year-old guy with a band t-shirt, greasy hair, and fingers that moved on the keyboard faster than she could follow. "So you want me to trace connections between this woman," he pointed to Brielle's photo, "and employees of this company?" "Yes." "Without any concrete proof besides conversations you overheard?" "Yes." "And you want to do this in 2 hours?" 2.5 hours. Kevin stared at her for a moment, then shrugged. "I've done harder things for less money." 90 minutes later, they had something. It wasn't much, but it was real. Call records between Brielle and an employee in Dorian's company's IT department. Messages on an alternative social network that Kevin managed to access, don't ask how. And a suspicious bank transfer dated 2 weeks before the leak. "Is this enough?" Callie asked, looking at the screen. "For a court? No." Kevin leaned back in his chair. "To cause trouble? Maybe." Cause trouble. It was better than nothing. Callie spent the entire night organizing everything. Printed documents, made copies, created a presentation on her phone that looked like it had been put together by a 10-year-old, but contained real information. At 6 in the morning, she was ready. Or at least she thought she was. "You're going to do what?" Marcy asked when Callie called to say she wouldn't be coming to work. I'm going to a press conference. You weren't invited to any press conference. I know. Callie? Marcy, I have to do this. If it doesn't work, at least I tried. If it works, she took a deep breath. If it works, maybe I can fix some things. You're in love with him, aren't you? Callie didn't answer. She didn't need to. At 9 a.m, she was standing outside the hotel where the press conference would take place. She held a folder full of documents, wore the most professional outfit she had, a black blouse and pants that didn't have a hole, and tried not to get sick from nerves. Reporters entered through the lobby. Cameras, microphones, important people. And in the middle of all this, a waitress with improvised evidence and a crazy plan. You can do this, she murmured to herself. You can do this. Then she took a deep breath and went in. The security guard at the door stopped her immediately. Credentials? Callie smiled, the most confident smile she could forge. I'm a witness, and I have information that will change everything. The security guard frowned, but before he could respond, a voice sounded behind Callie. Let her in. Callie turned, and there was Dorian, pale, tired, but looking at her as if she were the only person in the world. She's with me, he said. The security guard looked at Dorian, looked at Callie, looked at the crumpled folder in her hands, and stepped aside. Callie entered the hotel lobby feeling like she'd just invaded another planet. Everything was marble, crystal chandeliers, and people in suits that cost more than her car, if she had a car. What are you doing here? Dorian asked quietly as they walked. Saving you. I didn't ask to be saved. You also didn't ask to be destroyed, but here we are. Dorian opened his mouth to respond, but they were interrupted by an advisor with impeccable hair who appeared out of nowhere. Mr. Briggs, the press conference starts in 5 minutes. The lawyers want to review the final statement. Tell them there's been a change of plans. What change? Dorian looked at Callie. I don't know yet, but it's going to be interesting. The press room was packed. Reporters in rows of chairs, positioned cameras, microphones on stands. In the back, an elevated table with seats for Dorian, his lawyers, and company representatives. It was formal, serious, and absolutely terrifying. And in the right corner, sitting as if she owned the place, was Brielle Stanton. Callie saw her at the same instant Brielle saw her. Brielle's eyes narrowed. The perfect smile faltered for a fraction of a second, and then it returned, sharper than before. Dorian, darling. Brielle stood up and walked toward them with the grace of a snake in high heels. What a surprise to see you bringing company. Brielle, Dorian said, his voice icy, and the waitress. Brielle turned to Callie with fake sympathy. Did you come to serve coffee for the journalists? How helpful. Actually, I came to serve the truth. Callie held the folder tighter. But thanks for your concern. The press conference started before Brielle could respond. Dorian went to the main table. The lawyers read statements. Journalists asked aggressive questions. It was exactly the kind of corporate circus Callie had always imagined. Formal, tense, and completely disconnected from reality. She waited, watched, and when the time for open questions came, she raised her hand. The advisor moderating the press conference looked at her with confusion. Which media outlet are you from, miss? The Salt Corner, Callie said. It's a restaurant. We don't have a media outlet, but we have information. Nervous laughter ran through the room. This is highly irregular. I have proof that the accusations against Dorian Briggs are false. Callie's voice sounded firmer than she felt. And I know who's behind the leak. The silence that followed was absolute, and then chaos began. Reporters shouting questions, cameras turning toward her. Dorian's lawyers looking like they were going to have a collective heart attack. And Brielle getting paler by the second. This is absurd, Brielle said loudly, standing up. Who is this woman? Why are you giving attention to a waitress? Callie interrupted, walking to the center of the room. Is that what you were going to say? Because it seems you underestimated what waitresses can observe. She opened the folder. On the 14th of this month, 2 men sat at the restaurant where I work. They mentioned a woman who had access and an IT guy. Callie pulled out the first document. These are call records between Brielle Stanton and Marcus Webb, an employee in the technology department of Briggs Company. Murmurs spread through the room. That doesn't prove anything, Brielle said, her voice trembling slightly. You're right, by itself, it doesn't. Callie pulled out another document. But this is a bank transfer of $15,000 from a shell company account to Marcus Webb's personal account, made 2 weeks before the leak. Coincidence? And this, Callie continued, pulling out a printout of messages, are conversations between you and Marcus discussing the plan and making Dorian pay. The room exploded. Brielle stepped back, her face losing all calculated composure. You hacked my messages? No, you were dumb enough to use a public social network with a fake account. Callie shrugged. Tip. B. Stanton 1990 isn't exactly a creative pseudonym. A reporter in the front row let out a laugh. This is a lie, Brielle shouted, looking desperately at the lawyers, at Dorian, at anyone who could save her. She's making this up. It's revenge because I exposed her. You exposed me for being interested in someone. Callie felt her voice waver, but continued. I'm exposing you for destroying an innocent person's life. I don't think we're on the same level. Brielle took a step toward Callie, eyes flashing. You don't know who you're dealing with, Waitress. I have lawyers. I have connections. You have a fake profile called B. Stanton 1990, Callie interrupted, and apparently the creativity of a potato. Another journalist laughed. Then another. Soon, half the room was suppressing smiles. Brielle's face turned red. I'm going to sue you. I'm going to sue that restaurant. I'm going to. You're going to what? One of Dorian's lawyers stood up, adjusting his glasses with a calm that contrasted with the chaos. Miss Stanton, I strongly recommend that you stop talking. Everything you say here is being recorded by approximately 20 cameras. Brielle looked around. The cameras were all pointed at her, red lights blinking, reporters scribbling frantically. This is a setup, she stammered. A setup is what you did to Mr. Briggs, the lawyer responded. And based on the evidence presented, we have enough material for a formal investigation. Corporate fraud, defamation, conspiracy. You can't prove anything. Maybe not, but the police can, and they love cases like this. Brielle went completely pale. It was at that moment that a hotel security guard approached discreetly. Miss Stanton, we're going to need you to come with us. What? Why? There's a legal team waiting to speak with you, and some police officers who would like to ask some questions. Police officers? Leaking corporate documents is a crime, miss. The guard gestured toward the door. This way, please. Brielle didn't move. She seemed frozen, processing the fact that her perfect life was crumbling in real time, in front of cameras, for the whole world to see. This can't be happening, she murmured. This can't. Miss, the guard insisted. Don't touch me. Brielle pushed his hand away. Do you know who I am? Do you know who my friends are? I do, miss, and they're probably watching this live right now. That was the final blow. Brielle looked at the room, at the cameras, at the faces watching her with a mixture of shock and satisfaction, at Dorian, who remained impassive at the main table, at Callie, who was shaking but still standing, and then something broke in her. Fine, she said, her voice suddenly empty. Fine. She started walking toward the door but stopped next to Callie. You think you won? Brielle whispered, low enough for only Callie to hear. You don't belong in his world. You never will. Callie held her gaze. Maybe not, but at least I won't be leaving here escorted by security guards. Brielle opened her mouth to respond, but the guard interrupted her. Miss Stanton, now. And then she was gone. The expensive heels echoed on the marble floor as she crossed the room. 2 guards flanked her. A third followed behind. Reporters kept taking pictures, the sound of clicks creating a humiliating soundtrack for the most pathetic exit Callie had ever seen. At the door, Brielle turned one last time. Her gaze met Dorian's for an instant, and there was something there that looked like regret, or maybe just anger at being caught. And then she was gone. The door closed, and the room exploded in questions again. Callie felt her legs tremble, her hands sweat, her heart beat so hard it felt like it would come out through her throat. She had done it, had said everything, had exposed Brielle in front of the whole world. And now the whole world was looking at her, a waitress, in the middle of a press conference, holding documents that probably wouldn't hold up in a real court. Fear hit her like a cold wave. What if she'd made a mistake? What if Brielle managed to get away with everything? What if she had just destroyed her own life for someone who wasn't even with her anymore? Callie began, her voice failing. And then Dorian stood up. He walked toward her slowly, ignoring the lawyers trying to hold him back, ignoring the reporters shouting questions, ignoring the advisor who looked about to faint. He stopped in front of Callie. "You did this for me," he said, low enough for only her to hear. "You would do it for me," she responded. "If things were the other way around, I would. Then we're even." Dorian smiled, that rare, full smile that transformed his entire face. And then he turned to the reporters. "You want a statement?" His voice was firm, clear, completely different from the defeated man who had entered that room. "Here it is. I was sabotaged. By someone I trusted, by someone I thought I knew, and I almost lost everything. My company, my reputation, my dignity." He looked at Callie. "But the person who saved me wasn't any lawyer, wasn't any crisis advisor, wasn't any image consultant. It was a waitress from a neighborhood restaurant who saw something wrong and decided to do something right, without asking for anything in return, without expecting recognition, just because it was the right thing to do." Callie felt her eyes sting. "Dorian, I've spent my whole life building things," he continued, his voice softer now. "Companies, fortunes, reputations, but I never built anything that truly mattered. Until I met her." He took Callie's hand in front of all the cameras. "I love this woman, and I don't care if the whole world knows." The room exploded in camera flashes. Someone in the back shouted, "This is better than a soap opera." A reporter dropped his microphone. Dorian's advisor finally fainted, or at least looked like he was going to. And Callie stood there, holding a billionaire's hand in the middle of a media circus, not knowing whether to laugh or cry. "You just declared love at a press conference," she said. "I did, in front of cameras, many of them. This is going to become a meme, probably. You're terrible with timing, I know." Dorian smiled. "But do you love me anyway?" Callie looked at him, at the tired eyes, at the crooked smile, at the man who had been as broken as she was. "I'll think about it," she said. But she was smiling when she said it. And somewhere, being escorted to an interrogation room, Brielle Stanton was discovering that expensive heels don't help much when you're being investigated by the police. 6 months later, Callie still couldn't believe what she saw. The salt corner had changed. Not completely. It still had the wooden tables, the familiar smell of home cooking, and the horrible boat painting that Gus refused to take down. But now the walls had a fresh coat of paint, the chairs didn't creak anymore, and there were delicate lights hanging from the ceiling that made everything look like it came out of a movie. Dorian had renovated the entire restaurant, not to transform it into something fancy or pretentious, just to make it the best version of itself. "You're smiling to yourself again," Marcy said, passing by her with a tray. "I'm not." "You are. That silly smile of someone who's in love." "I don't have a silly smile." "You do, and it's getting worse." Callie threw a napkin at her, but she was laughing. The last few months had been a whirlwind. Brielle was officially charged with conspiracy and corporate fraud. The trial was still ongoing, but Dorian's lawyers were confident. Marcus Webb, the IT employee, had made a deal with the prosecution and handed over everything in exchange for a reduced sentence. The press conference became a meme, as Callie had predicted. "Waitress detective takes down influencer" was trending for 3 days. Someone made a montage of her with a detective hat that got 2 million views. Callie hated and loved it in equal parts. But the most important thing was that things between her and Dorian were in a strange limbo. They saw each other almost every day, talked for hours, laughed together, but neither of them had put a name to what it was, until that night. The restaurant closed early. Callie thought it was strange. Normally they stayed open until midnight on Fridays, but Gus said something about electrical maintenance and sent everyone home. "Aren't you going?" Marcy asked, grabbing her purse. "I'm going to finish cleaning some things." "At 8 p.m.? I like organization." "You're lying." "Totally." Marcy rolled her eyes, but she was smiling when she left. Callie was alone in the restaurant. The lights were lower than normal. Candles, since when were there candles, illuminated the tables, and there was music playing softly. Her heart started beating faster. "Dorian?" she called. "In the kitchen." Callie walked to the back, pushing the door open, and stopped. Dorian was there, wearing an apron, covered in flour, with an expression of absolute concentration as he tried and miserably failed to fold pastel dough. "What are you doing?" she asked. "Cooking." You don't know how to cook? I learned. When? Over the last 3 weeks. He looked at her and there was flour in his hair, on his eyebrow, on the corner of his nose. I watched tutorials. Tutorials for what? How to make pastel. He pointed to the deformed dough. It's not going very well. Callie looked at the dough. It looked like it had been attacked by a bear. That's... She tried to find a kind word. Creative. It's horrible. It's horrible, she agreed, laughing. Why are you trying to make pastel? Because you said it was your grandmother's favorite dish, and I wanted to do something special. Callie's heart squeezed. Dorian? Wait, let me finish. He took a deep breath, visibly nervous. I had a plan, a rehearsed speech. I was going to serve dinner, light more candles. What happened to the plan? I burned the first pastel, and the second, and possibly started a small fire on the third. You started a fire? Small, very small. Gus helped put it out. Gus was here? He was my instructor. Dorian paused. He said I'm the worst student he's ever had. Callie started to laugh. A laugh that came from deep within, that made her eyes water. You're unbelievable, she said. I know. Dorian smiled, and even covered in flour, he'd never looked so handsome. But I wanted to do this right. He walked toward her, stopping a few inches away. Callie, these last few months have been the best of my life. And I know we never defined what this is between us. We just were together. No labels, no pressure. I liked it that way, she said quietly. Me too, but I want more. The air between them became dense. More like what? Callie asked. Dorian took a deep breath. I want to be able to tell people that you're my girlfriend. I want to take you to dinner at places that aren't taco stands at 2 in the morning, although I also want to keep doing that. I want to wake up thinking about you and know I have the right to send silly good morning texts without seeming weird. You already send silly good morning texts. I know, but I get nervous every time. Callie felt her eyes sting. Dorian, I'm not proposing marriage, he said quickly. I know it's early. I know we're still getting to know each other, but I want to do this right. I want to build something with you. Slowly, calmly, one day at a time. He extended his hand to her. Callie Rivera, will you be my girlfriend, officially? With all the complications, world differences, and teasing about silverware alignment included? Callie looked at his hand, at the hopeful eyes, at the man covered in flour who had tried and failed spectacularly to cook for her. You know this is going to be complicated, right? She said. We're from different worlds. People are going to talk. People already talk. I don't care. I'm still a waitress. And I'm still the guy who aligns silverware 4 times. 3. 4. I counted this time. Callie laughed, and realized she was crying too. Not from sadness, from something she couldn't name. Something that felt a lot like happiness. I never imagined this, she said, her voice trembling. Being looked at like this, completely, without having to prove anything. You don't need to prove anything, Dorian said gently. You're already everything I wanted, even before I knew I wanted it. Callie took a deep breath, looked at him one last time, and took his hand. Yes, she said, I accept being your girlfriend, officially, with all the complications included. The smile that spread across Dorian's face was the most beautiful Callie had ever seen. Really? Really, but with one condition. What? You never try to make pastel alone again. That was a humanitarian disaster. Dorian laughed and pulled her into a hug. Callie felt the flour stick to her blouse and didn't care one bit. I adore you, he murmured into her hair. I know. She smiled against his chest. I adore you too, even though you're a disaster in the kitchen. I can improve. No, you can't. True, but I can keep trying. Callie pulled back a little to look at him. That I'll accept. And then she kissed him. There, in the kitchen of the salt corner, surrounded by flour and destroyed dough and the smell of burnt pastel, they began something new. Not a fairy tale ending, just a beginning. An imperfect beginning, messy, covered in flour, exactly as it should be. Outside, through the kitchen window, Gus, Marcy, and Benny watched the scene. I knew it, Marcy whispered. I knew from the first day. You said he was a spy, Benny reminded her. That was past Marcy. Present Marcy always knew it was love. Both of you shut up, Gus said, sniffling suspiciously. Let's give them privacy. They moved away from the window, leaving Callie and Dorian alone. Inside the kitchen, Callie pulled away from the kiss and looked around. You know what's funny? What? All of this started because you spilled a glass of water. Dorian smiled. And you asked if I was okay. 3 words. 3 words that changed everything. Callie intertwined her fingers with his. Are you okay now? Dorian looked at her, at the messy kitchen, at the messy and perfect life that was beginning. Now, he said, I'm better than ever. And for the first time, it was completely true. The end. So what do you think of the story about the millionaire who dined alone and the waitress who had the courage to ask, Are you okay? Can 3 simple words really change an entire life? Leave your opinion in the comments. On a scale of 0 to 10, what rating would you give this story? Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications to receive more touching stories like this one. See you in the next one.